Beautiful souls, welcome back to Awaken Your Authentic Self. I'm Jessica, and today we're diving deep with someone truly extraordinary. But first, let me ask you this. What if I told you there's a woman who helps global CEOs and changemakers access something called Primordial Creatrix Consciousness Wisdom, and she's got a year-long wait list for her work? Well, that's exactly who we're sitting down with today. Roxanne Chaput is a globally renowned, modern-day embodied Creatrix Oracle who specializes in what she calls intentional path cutting for conscious creators and disruptive embodied heart leaders. Her work is all about helping people birth through what she describes as primordial creational God-sovereign universal liberty. Essentially, returning to our deepest wisdom while creating radical change that honors both humanity and Mother Earth. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, oof, this sounds intense, or is this for me? Let me tell you why you need to hear what Roxanne has to say. She works with high-level global decision makers from for-profit and nonprofit organizations, helping them shift from systems rooted in separation and fear to unity consciousness. She's developed two powerful modalities, the Illumination Retreat and Cellular Healing, that provide what she calls direct access to primordial creatrix consciousness wisdom in full proximity to geographical location. In a world where we see so much toxicity and division, Roxanne's approach is about reunifying humanity while maintaining authentic sovereignty. She talks about the need for conscious leaders who can hold space for revolutionary, evolutionary, disruptive change without getting caught in the old patterns of dichotomy and inequality. Roxanne, thank you so much for being here with us today for our community who's ready to step into their authentic power and be part of the conscious change our world desperately needs. I know this conversation is going to be transformational. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's such an honor to be here. I'm excited to dive in.
Oh, so am I. Let's get started. Roxanne, you've developed unique methodologies like the Illumination Retreat and Cellular Healing that provide direct access to primordial creatrix consciousness wisdom. For someone listening who's feeling called to step into conscious leadership, but feels overwhelmed by all the noise in the spiritual space, how do they distinguish between authentic embodied wisdom and performative spirituality?
I love that question, Jessica, because in essence, everything that is in the congruency of our knowingness and our intuitive barometer is where our real inner truth lies. And that is the alchemy of the wisdom that we have within us. And when we're inundated with things that are coming from, conscious communities or spiritual communities, we're also looking to see if it is actually in the full congruency of our alignment and if it's creating harmonification within ourselves, or is it creating distension, or is it creating dis-ease within the inner self. And a lot of the times what we see, and this is why, personally, it's important for me that I'm not tapped into certain platforms or communities that I don't believe are actually calibrated from one's inner truth, but from a place of regurgitation. So the exchange is it adding value, and is it adding healing? Is it adding that beauty that is actually allowing us to come to a place that is within, or is it relying on external sources of validation and of information in order for us to feel in congruency with ourselves? What are we seeking? And what is the information? What is the wisdom that we're actually looking to sit with and that we're looking to embody?
I love that. Now, Roxanne, you speak about reunification of humanity and working with global decision makers to create revolutionary intentional path cutting. Many of our listeners are sensitive to the toxicity and division that they see in the world. Can you share a specific example of how unity consciousness actually looks in practice when confronted with systems rooted in separation and fear?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, working with countless executives throughout the world, it's this piece is that we want to be able to connect with humanity, and we want to be able to build community. And in that same essence that we're looking to build such a beautiful community within our structure, how do we separate the pieces that are actually creating segregation or divisionary aspects within our own leadership embodiment? And that's not just as a leader of a business, but leader of our lives. And how do we lead in our communities, and how do we lead within our families? So when we bring that context in, when are we actually serving from a place that is from a place of wounded or, restrictive belief systems or structures that weren't created by us and actually don't have resonance with our inner truth? Or is it actually coming from a place that is cultivated within ourselves and is actually guided by our inner truth and our inner knowingness? And we're leading from a place of how are we adding and how are we contributing to humanity? How are we bringing more love? How are we bringing more, connection? How are we bringing more of that beauty that we actually integrate into one another, and we actually collaborate with one another, and we connect with one another, where we're not coming from a place of comparison or competition, but we're coming from a place of how do I embody your strengths, and how do I embody my strengths, and how do we make this world better?
That is so beautiful. And it makes perfect sense, because I think, like you said, there's so much competition in the world, and it seems like more people are working against each other than working together.
And I think when we see, more of that collaborative approach of where we can really be in somebody's own embodiment, or where we can really, honor our own embodiment, it's such a more powerful place, because we're not disempowering ourselves. And when we get into these states of, comparison, segregation, division, or anything of that nature, we are actually coming from a place of disempowerment, and we're not actually calibrated within ourselves, in a place of empowerment, where we actually are in that embodiment of the now, where we're actually able to contribute all of our strengths, our gifts, our abilities, where we're actually taking and we're stripping those elements away, because we're trying to, be like the next person, or be able to identify like the next person, when in reality, that's not the alchemy of the self. The
Right.
self is, everybody has their own individual strengths and beauties and gifts and abilities. And how do we actually utilize those things to fortify things and learn from one another, instead of trying to take away from one another?
Exactly. Absolutely. Now, your work honors indigenous roots of ancient elders and the celestial planes. Given the current conversations around cultural appropriation and spiritual bypassing, how do you help people connect authentically with ancient wisdom without minimizing or misrepresenting indigenous traditions?
Yeah, I think there is the element of, the indigenous traditions, how critical they are in terms of not just, modern day modalities, but how do we actually honor the ancient and traditional ways of our modalities, of where they were actually originated from, and where the creation was of the modalities that have come to the earth timeline. And how do we actually embody that? But how do we also, what we're touching on is, cultural appropriation, and
Right.
how do we respect that with integrity and dignity? And it's not about us taking over something, or, pivoting something to be our own. It's actually embodying the wisdom that is actually coming through from our ancestors, from the ones that have walked the earth before us, and how are we actually able to come into alignment with them, instead of serving from a place of, a lot of times what we're seeing right now, I guess maybe I'll expand a little bit here, but what we're seeing right now is that a lot of people that are in the spiritual communities or doing spiritual practice, they're actually coming from a place that they're serving a little bit more from the ego, and the ego is not a bad thing in any way. It's a beautiful thing in order for us to be able to be in existence. But there is a culmination. Are we serving from, our human ego or our spiritual ego, or
Right.
are we actually coming from a place that we're serving from being healed, and we're actually able to translate the information without adding our perspective, our perception of something that is a wounded pattern, or, a cycle, or anything of a limited belief, that we're actually creating a structure into that healing modality. So how do we actually use that modality to serve others, and not to be able to serve our egos? No healer, no one in a spiritual community heals another person. That
Right.
is the embodiment of the self-work, right?
Right.
We can guide, we can steward, we can move energy, we can do these things, but at the end of the day, the autonomy and the sovereignty of that being is to be able to choose that they're willing and wanting to step into a space where they can heal themselves. So when we're coming back to the ancient practices were never about, the medicine man, the medicine woman, the healer of the tribe being able to heal the other person. Was to be able to enact or remove whatever was needed for that body to be able to fully heal itself within its autonomy and sovereignty of the being.
I often experience that with Reiki as a Reiki master. I will have clients who automatically assume because they're going through sessions, like they're going to be healed. Like, you need to do your inner work as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to help guide you. I'm here to help to help you learn how to push your energies around and do my part, but you have to do your part as well. And you have to take accountability for your own healing.
And that's the massive piece, right? Is that accountability. Mm-hmm. And before we can have accountability, we need to have awareness. Mm-hmm. And when we have that awareness, obviously, if we're coming to a practitioner, we know that something isn't in harmonization of ourselves. We know that something isn't quite jiving for ourselves, or that we're in need of something. And this is also an important thing, is that, as we learn how to heal ourselves, it's important that we don't always rely on external aspects in order to, dictate how we should be healing, or step into a modality, or be dependent on things, when we can actually learn how to heal ourselves. And that's really about what cellular healing is how do we move our own energy? How do we extract our own energy? How do we do our own retrievals? And how do we come into the embodiment of self, where we can actually heal from a place of autonomy and sovereignty? Doesn't mean that we're not going to utilize tools or wisdom and knowledge transference from other people's gifts and abilities, but how do we actually embody that within ourselves? And how do we heal from that place, where we start really focusing on ourselves, and where we really start utilizing the tools and the medicines and our internal medicines to actually heal the body and activate our own pineal gland, and come into this place where we're actually, in this incredible space of being able to heal our multidimensional self, and not just the physical body or the emotional body, but how do we actually heal all of our bodies, all of the multidimensional self? And that's the place that we're coming to. And it's just like a therapist, like a therapist is great for talk therapy. They're able to be a sounding board and a mirror in order for us to understand where we need to have deeper healing. But at the end of the day, if we don't take, the accountability of our life and of our choices and of our belief systems and our structures and our patterns and cycles, at the end of the day, we won't be able to fully heal. Because in order for us to fully heal, we need all of these pieces to be in congruency of our centers of intelligence and throughout all of our bodies. So how do we actually come to that space? And that's where cellular healing is an embodiment of those teachings, is how do we actually utilize our own wisdom, our own self, and how do we actually heal ourselves to the best of our ability?
That is, I couldn't say that more perfectly myself. That is, it's one of the things that I always say is when you're in the process of healing yourself, like, you really need to just tune in. You have to tune in to what you want. You have to pour out what's not serving you to make room in order to allow all of these changes to happen. Like, people want to stay where they are. They want to continue to do the same things that they're constantly doing, tune into the same type of toxic, social media or news or whatever it is that they're tuning into that really doesn't serve them, but they're expecting change.
Absolutely. And I think when we're expecting change and we're staying in, a belief structure or a unhealthy cycle or pattern that we're in, why are we doing that? Mm-hmm. What is the actual root of that? What is the actual reasoning why? What piece of external validation do we need from social media to tell us that we are living life okay, or that we are a good person, or that we're actually able to take care of ourselves? And this is a little bit of why I've chosen to step away from all of those platforms, is I just don't believe in any platform that devalues another human being. And we think that some information is actually being beneficial, but in the end of the day, like if it is contradictory, then it's only creating more internal chaos within ourselves because we can't decipher through the information, and we're not relying on our knowingness and our soulful being. We're relying on others to be able to share, their perspective and perception. And where is that perspective and perception emanating from? Where is it rooted? Is it coming from a wounded place? Is it coming from a place of love? Is it coming from a
From
place
their own
of
fears, or
exactly
exactly.
from their own fears, their own projections? Or is it coming from a place that is actually trying to serve one another and to actually affect true healing? Or is it trying to get clicks and clickbait and to be able to get likes and momentum so there's financial compensation? So there's always going to be a bit of that. And then we have, if you're creating these elements, what validation are they seeking, right?
Right.
What external validation are they seeking in order to feel worthy or to feel that they are deserving? Or what are the elements that they are trying to fulfill? Because at the end of the day, it's the inner fulfillment that is what we're all looking for. Everybody wants liberation, and how liberation feels or looks is different to everyone. But they're looking for liberation. And if we're going onto platforms that are continuously disempowering us and continuously taking our energy source, I've never felt like, if I think about the exchange that I've had on social media, it's always like a mental exhaustion or an emotional exhaustion, depending on what came into the algorithm or to the feed. So what is that exchange that we're actually looking for? And why are we willing to settle for an exchange that disempowers us as a being? Why are we not looking for the exchange that actually empowers us? And what belief structure is that actually connected to?
That is one of the reasons why I don't know why, for what reason, all of a sudden Spirit felt it very necessary to throw at me 7.3 thousand followers on Facebook out of nowhere. I had a private page and I started waking up to hundreds of friend requests, and I just couldn't understand it. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I just started posting the stuff I was posting, and I was just posting empowering things and posting things that were meaningful, trying to help people to be their best selves. And
Yeah.
now that's where my community is.
Yeah.
And I see them posting the same things, and I see them, putting things out there that they're empowering each other, and everybody's always, it's become more of a nice thing where I don't mind putting something out there, and I don't want to get too involved because, again, it is exhausting. But now that I know that there are people actually out there looking and listening, I'll put stuff
Yeah.
out there which I know has value to them.
Yeah.
And like I said, even if you're not 100% listening, there's no problem with planting a seed.
Absolutely. And I think that is the difference in the exchange. And if all the platform was it was that, and there was no algorithms that was constantly trying to throw you into a different energetic vibration. And that's, at the end of the day, it's the vibration and the emanation of how we actually create our life. And when we're coming into creatrix energy, how are we being in our healthy masculine and our healthy femininity? And how are we actually protecting our energetic frequencies and our vibrational alignment? And when we're doing things like that and we're offering things of good service, how do we actually minimize the impact that isn't serving the energetic body or the soulful body or the mental body or the emotional body? So if we go in, we do exactly what we need to do, spread our message, spread the seed. That's the beauty and that's the empowerment. And how do we actually stay in that resonance and not allow anything else to, within that platform, to be able to disempower us?
Correct. Now, you talk about celebrating universal sovereignty while also being of service to communities. For spiritual entrepreneurs and change agents listening, how do you navigate the tension between personal sovereignty and collective service without burning out or losing your authentic self?
I mean, this is, the hottest topic of conversation in any consultation that I'm with. And even with some of my current executives that I'm collaborating with right now, it's how do we be, serving the collective and then also serving our own autonomy and sovereignty, and being able to come from a place that we are not burning out and we are creating boundaries. And these are, the highlight of the conversations are what boundaries need to be created and what belief structure needs to be created in order for us to create and to honor the boundaries that we're creating. So if I'm an executive and I am, serving humanity at a great scale, how do I actually preserve my own energy? What are my non-negotiables? What are my boundaries? And what belief structures are they connected to? When we're in a place where we are, burning out, that awareness piece, what is the awareness? What is the accountability? What is the action that we need to take in order for us to not be in a place of burnout? At the end of the day, if we're burning out in terms of our own personal sovereignty and to be able to serve, a collective masses, we are not in the energetic frequency and vibrational alignment of empowerment when we are not taking care of ourselves and we are not having the boundaries that are set in place in order for us to have longevity, in order for us to have sustainability. If I can only serve humanity for 6 months because I'm choosing to burn myself out, at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? That's the part of our sovereignty of free choice and free will, is that we have the choice to step into something and we have the choice to choose a different pathway at any given moment. And there's never, a too late of a time or a wrong time to be able to choose ourselves and to be able to choose ourselves in a healthy way, in a selfless way, that we're actually, the more that we choose and lean into that space and that we, come to this place of being in a place of being centered and to be able to be fulfilled and inner peace and have all of these things that are being met within not just our business aspect of life or collective life, but our personal life. When these things are in harmonization, we're able to serve at a greater capacity. So why are we choosing the latter? What are we trying to prove? What are we trying to prove within our belief systems? And what are we trying to be worthy of? Is it coming from a place of ego? Is it coming from a place of being able to trust and surrender that we actually need to follow our own inner knowingness? Because the soul will never want us to burn out, right? The inner knowingness, our inner being will never want us to burn out. How do we come to a place where we're actually following the whispers and the information and the wisdom of the soul and honoring that? And how do we honor our full multi-dimensional self? And if we're not, why are we choosing not to? What is that element? So if we need to be, it's a little bit of, being on the gas and being on the clutch. How do we actually serve the collective, but still serve our own internal self-practice and our own personal lives without one having to be at the exchange of the other?
It's funny you say that, because my move to Spain and leaving my corporate job after 16 years, I was burning it at all ends.
Yep.
Starting at 5 a.m. with employees calling out and ending at 9 o'clock, still answer emails. And at the same time, trying to build my podcast and put messages out and do the things that I wanted to do, that I was feeling in my spirit. And it's funny because certain things were just not aligning with me until I made that move. It's
interesting.
Like, as soon as I left there and got here, it's like my whole world opened up. All of a sudden, everything I had been looking for fell into place and into alignment. And it's like all of a sudden I was right there, right in the frequency I needed to be.
And that's the beauty of choice, right? Choosing something different. The soul nudged you, right?
Yes.
The soul was like, we can't do this no more. We need to make a decision. Are we going to follow our soul path? And it doesn't mean that, I've worked in corporate for many years. I still help a lot of leaders in the corporate world and, the landscape. And yes, it is very demanding, but if we can still be in our sovereignty and our autonomy while actually serving at a corporate level, it's being able to find that harmonization within the two worlds and actually bridging them together and not, denying one aspect of ourselves.
Right.
How do we embody the gifts and the abilities and still honor our soul wisdom and soul whispers and soul knowingness into the alchemy of how we actually choose to lead these organizations? And that is the power of change. And sometimes we need to just take a step back and we need to be able to take that moment of self-reflection and introspection and to be able to sit with that. And why am I choosing what I'm choosing? Is this really where I wanted my path to go? Do I feel in alignment with the pathway ahead of me? Or is something not feeling right? And it's okay. We don't always have to feel right on the path that we're on, but it doesn't mean that the path is wrong. There's the mastery of that, of the alchemy that is being taught, the lessons that are being taught, the wisdom that is being exchanged into that experience of what you're actually willing to step into and what you're actually willing not to step into. And that's how we create a boundary. I am not willing to allow something to get me to the place where I feel like I'm going to burn out. I am not willing to sacrifice my family in order to serve humanity. These are the non-negotiables, and these are the boundaries that we have to be very honest with ourselves. Why are we giving ourselves, at the end of the day, when we're in a corporate, landscape and environment, if you're not with a conscious leader, you are a number at the end of the day.
Correct.
As soon as you leave, somebody else comes in to take your position. And it's not really utilized in terms of your strengths and aptitude. It's more of like who can get the job done. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what they've been taught in terms of, the patriarchy and the landscape of how corporate was essentially built. But that's why we're seeing those systems start to crumble, because people are not willing to burn themselves out anymore. They're like, there has to be more to life. There has to be more to why I'm here. And how can I actually serve a greater purpose?
And initially I stayed for, I would say the last 3 years, I stayed with them because I knew I was making a change, and I was making a conscious change with my employees. I chose to be a different kind of leader. I chose to be a conscious leader. I chose to be more empathetic and understanding. And despite the fact that they had their SOPs and their rules and their HR policies or whatever, I still looked at my employees as individuals and allowed them their individuality and allowed them their creativeness and allowed them. But it literally, for like the last 4 months before I left, when I tell you they made me as uncomfortable as uncomfortable could be. And that's when I decided, I said, you know what? Spirit is now nudging me out. Like it's telling me like, this is like, you're done. Like you've done
no
all
longer
that
in
you can
alignment.
It's no longer in alignment, because all they did was do everything possible to make my life completely uncomfortable. And this is the higher ups. So it was at that point where I said, well, I obviously can't make a change with you. So I'm just at this point going to have to make the change within myself. And I followed my heart, and I've felt a billion times better. I feel a sense of bliss and happiness. I don't stop smiling anymore. And I live in the present, which is something I wasn't allowed to do at that point anymore.
Absolutely. And, when other leaders see that you're a conscious leader and that you actually embody all the strengths in terms of what leadership actually is, and how you served your team, of being able to allow them to be in their individuality and their creativity and to be able to bring their ideas and their perspective and everything to the table. That is the empowerment of true leadership. And when people see that, that can be very threatening to their own leadership, because that means that you are tapped into something that they are not, that you are in alignment with yourself, within your inner self, that you're actually creating. And this is where we talk about, the multiplication of leaders. You are actually multiplying the leaders that you're serving, because you're teaching them that leadership doesn't have to look like the old boys club. Leadership can actually look like a full embodiment of the multi-dimensional being, and to be able to actually serve from a place of compassion, of love, and of respect, and of integrity. And that is what we're seeing shift in terms of conscious leadership, is how do we stay integrity, not just within our leadership abilities, but within our personal lives. And for you to be called to make that shift and to be so uncomfortable and like have that uncomfortability created around you, is exactly that. It was no longer in alignment, and it needed to be something forceful in order for you to actually be more introspective and be like, this isn't serving me.
Correct.
This isn't where I'm meant to be. And it doesn't mean that you may never go back to a corporate landscape, but it means that you'll be very intentional of the leadership that you will embody as you enter into those spaces, should you ever want to.
Well, I dyed my hair purple. So I said after I left, so when my boss came to pick up my stuff, and she goes, your hair, and I says, no longer dictated by corporate America.
And you're like, perfect. And that's the beauty of the empowerment. And true leadership is not about control, right? It's not about control. It's about empowerment. How do I empower you to be the best person that you choose to be, and how you choose to show up? When we try to create limitation, that is the pathway where a lot of leaders have misconception, is that as a leader, we're not trying to create limitation. We're actually trying to create limitlessness. And how do we create that? If I want people to stay engaged, and if I want people to actually believe in what we're doing and to be rooted into what we're doing and not just do it because they need a paycheck in order to provide for their family, but actually feel like they're thriving and feel like they're
Right.
contributing and feel like they're adding such tremendous value. That is a completely different exchange for us to be able to honor their full sovereignty under that leadership, opposed to someone saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, X, Y, and Z. I mean, there's a way of having efficacy and there's a way to have, we are going to have ethics and we're going to have protocol within a structural business, but how do we actually honor the individuality and to actually be able to create spaces where they feel safe enough to actually be their authentic self and to be the full embodiment of who they are?
Exactly. Well, Roxanne, the concept of primordial creational God's sovereignty or God's sovereign universal liberty is powerful but complex. Can you give our audience a concrete, accessible way to experience even a glimpse of this state in their daily lives?
Yeah, absolutely. When we learn to go inward and we learn to, and it's not about, commercialized meditation, it's about being in a place of meditation that actually serves our being. And meditation isn't the same for everyone. It can be something that you really enjoy doing where it brings you into a different state of joy, happiness, fulfillment, and interconnection, where you're actually able to feel unconditionality and love. And when we come into these spaces, if it's breath work, if it's ecstatic dance, if it's, artistry, or if it's listening to music or whatever that is in terms of the feminine energy, we can't access primordial consciousness without being in our feminine energy and without honoring the masculine energy within ourselves. And the more that we choose to tap into the sacredity of what we have within ourselves is the more that we get to expand and the more that we get to explore within ourselves. So all we have to do is, this is, the simplicity of it is that we actually just need to be able to attune ourselves to our inner selves and to be able to listen to our inner selves without the interference of the noise. And sometimes it's very hard, or challenging to be able to, siphon out the noise opposed to our inner knowingness. But the more that we practice that, the more that we come into self, even if it's sometimes deep meditative states is, we can be listening to music and laying down, and all of a sudden we're a little bit more in of a transient state and we're connecting to all the energies and the frequencies that are around us. It's just different communication pathways that we're tapping into. The complexity of that is that we have to choose that. And sometimes it's very challenging to choose that when we have limited beliefs and patterns that tell us that we can't trust ourselves and we can't trust our inner knowingness. So how do we come to a place that we actually honor that and deeply honor that? And it's by doing these small little things of following our inner guidance, doing somatic movement, whatever that is that we feel in alignment, we feel joy, we feel purity around, that we don't feel like I have to do this. It's more of I choose to do this. And the more that we tap into that, the more becomes, we're able to hear things a lot more clearer. We get a lot more clarity. We have a lot more perspective. And we're coming from a place of inner perspective, inner clarity, inner fulfillment, and inner peace. And it's about choosing to step into those spaces whenever we feel we need to.
Yeah. I used to try to meditate all the time at the beginning, and I had such trouble. And I used to always think, because my mind wouldn't stay quiet, they're like, oh, your mind has to stay quiet. You can't focus on this, or you can't do this. I was like, you know what? Whatever it is that makes me peaceful and brings me to my space is okay. And it doesn't matter if I'm walking on the beach. It doesn't matter because all of a sudden if I'm present as I'm on the beach and all of a sudden I start getting messages, I'm no different than a person who's in a lotus pose.
Absolutely.
Meditating.
And this is the thing that, again, this is the dissonance, the distance, the segregation that creates within the conscious communities, is that it has to be this, you have to quiet the noise. No, that is not the reality. When we do that, we're creating resistance, and we're creating resistance to our inner messages. And it's not about silencing the mind. It's about honoring the mind. It's about being able to speak to the mind with love and kindness and compassion, and it actually being able to come into a place that we're harmonizing our centers of intelligence, our entire chakra system, our entire meridian system, and our entire, physical being, emotional being, intellectual being. It's coming into this place of alignment and not discrediting one of our bodies in order to listen to the other aspect. It's actually being able to honor that. And the more that we create resistance by saying, I have to have quiet, or I have to do this, or I have to do that, or yoga has to feel this way, or deep somatic ment has to feel, that way, or I have to do breath work this way. We are not honoring the self. We're honoring somebody else's external perception and perspective of how they chose to heal themselves. But it doesn't mean that that's the blueprint in order for us to heal and connect within ourselves.
Thank you for that, Roxanne.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Your work involves multisensory, multidimensional healing. For viewers who are skeptics or haven't experienced this depth of transformation, what is your approach to meeting people where they are?
I always meet people where they are. And I've learned this the hard way of doing this for almost 20 years now.
No.
But it's never about convincing somebody else. And I'm not here to convince somebody else in terms of, the exchange of my words or what they should believe in. As a leader, when we step into spaces, I'm always, self-honoring. Whatever feels in the congruency of your inner truth, whatever resonates within your inner truth, that is your inner truth. That is not for me to dictate. That is not for me to have perception or perspective or projection on. That's for you to actually be able to embody and to be able to decipher within yourself and have that discernment. Is this actually my inner knowingness, or is this actually a rooted belief structure that could be created before I was even born, right? There's that connection from previous lifetimes. There's connection between the ancestral, when we talk about family constellations and ancestral connections and patterns and belief structures and our epigenetic pathways. We are looking at, is this actually in congruency with ourselves? And what I'll always, when we're in retreat and we have leaders that are on the fence about their own conscious abilities or their own, conscious connection, it's how do they actually honor themselves in that space where it actually feels really good. It feels very soft. It feels very loving and embracing, opposed to it feels very abrasive and it feels like you're being dictated or that you're being told that you have to believe a certain structure. Again, we're coming back to a place of segregation and division, that if you don't believe in a certain structure that I believe in, then we can no longer be in collaboration of community, when in reality that is not true. Your pathway of your soul pathway will have been greatly different than mine.
Right.
Your truth is just as equivalent as my truth. But are we coming from a scientific perspective? Are we coming from a community or an environmental perspective? Or we're actually resonating at the place of our own inner knowingness and our own inner trusting, that when I speak to someone, I speak to the knowingness. I don't speak to the intellectual body. The intellectual body will try everything. I mean, this is the beauty of our ego
To
and
fight
just
back.
the discernment to fight back. And if we have a rooted belief structure, we're going to have a lot of pushback. We're going to have a lot of resistance. So when I speak to the inner knowingness, the impact that happens to them is a soulful impact. They're like, whoa, like I didn't think of that, or I didn't sit with that. And you can see that they are mulling things over and that they're deep in introspection. Or if they're at a silent retreat, the questions that we are asking them in order for them to have connectivity to themselves, it's a powerful shifter for themselves. It's how do they actually feel the change within themselves. We can speak all day long. I can sing till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, if they don't experience that within themselves, then it's hard to be able to fathom or to be able to have understandability of what that actually is in terms of tangibility and context. If you've never felt true love, then you would think that that's impossible until you actually tap into a space of true love. If you never knew that you can have liberation of time or freedom of choice, then you would never think that that is possible. So when we have those limitations, the question becomes, why do we have that limitation when we are limitless creational beings? So when we're coming into that space of, people sitting with me in ceremony, or they come to me in terms of, as soon as they have that resistance, when people see that you live a certain way or that you're living in inner peace and they're feeling the energetic connection and the vibrational alignment and that they feel the love that emanates towards you or, from you, all of these things, that is the beauty of change. Change is within the state of being. It's not within the state of saying, right? So it's coming back into these contexts. If I'm living a life of inner peace and inner fulfillment and inner happiness, how do I get there? That's the question it becomes. And that's where I start leading from. What in your life is not bringing you into that congruency? What has disconnected you from your own faith of belief systems that you can actually create the life that you choose and that you can actually connect to all divine intelligence? And there's so much wisdom. There's so much communication pathways that are always wanting to connect with us. And that includes our soul self.
I think everyone, like you said, no one is listening. There's so much noise. Then they've got, their parental beliefs, and if they grew up in church, the religious beliefs, or they've got all these other I can't even think of the term right now, but they just
preconceived.
Thank you. Yes, they're preconceived notions and beliefs that really do block them.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's the thing is that noise was created in order for us to be in a place of disempowerment and external need of validation and desire and of community, when in reality that has always been internal. Mm-hmm. And when we think about why noise is created, it's to take us out of a place of our own sovereignty. When we are in a place that we have consistent emotional regulation and stability and inner peace, that is the most, like you're experiencing it right now, the way that you feel in terms of the peace and the happiness and the joy and the curiosity and the exploration and the adventure, that is the place of empowerment, right? And when we're, tapping into things that are constantly trying to disempower us, why are they trying to disempower us? Because if we are at our full limitation of creational being, that means we're very powerful.
Yes.
We're very powerful beings.
Yes. And that's very scary to a lot of people.
It's a very scary, and it's very hard to control. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard for fear mongering to not be effective in terms of being in our own personal sovereignty.
Roxanne, you talk about embodied presence and congruency in all aspects of life. How do you handle it when your own human experience doesn't quite match the elevated consciousness you're teaching?
Absolutely. I always try to have that congruency in terms of my own integrity, how I lead, in my life and my business structure with my clients is exactly how I lead in my family dynamic and with my friendships and everything that is around me. This doesn't mean that I'm not human. I've come here to experience being, in the human being and in a human state, and our human state, and even in our spiritual state, we do have emotional bodies. They're just different codexes that we have when we're in more of the third dimension of the linear. So when we are expressing our emotional body, when I'm having a bit of more of an emotional day, I have to come back to, why do I feel that way? What is activating me? What is triggering me? And how do I actually come back into alignment? This is a pathway that is continual. I'm never done my healing. I'm always learning. I'm always evolving. I'm always expanding and understanding and understanding within myself. What do I actually need to do in order to actually continue to be in a state of emotional regulation and inner peace, because this is what I'm choosing for my life. So what is not in the congruency of that? What do I need to create a boundary? What do I need to change in terms of a belief structure that maybe I didn't know was rooted there, or maybe it was interconnected with something else that I wasn't meant to be privy to in that now moment? And this is where, the surrendering of our ego, and it's not about the egoic death, it's about being able to surrender our ego and say, are you leading my life, or am I actually leading my life from inner knowingness? And if I'm at a place where I'm feeling, emotionally dysregulated, why am I allowing somebody else to take my power, and why am I giving them my power? How do I call back my power, and how do I actually stay in that state of my own inner power, and how do I give back their power in that exchange? It's a constant clearing. It's a constant, introspection, reflection. When I am, I'm in a relationship, if I'm activated in something, I know it has nothing to do with the other person.
Right.
It's what is it striking within me? What do I need to attend to and have intentionality around? And how do I nurture myself to forgive an aspect or to be able to love on myself even more compassionately with more grace?
It's like that
And
mirror
that's
effect.
where, exactly. And that's exactly where it comes to. And how do I continue to show up with love and empathy and compassion and respect for each other, but also to be able to honor myself and to not be able to leak onto others and to not be able to project onto others, but to actually sit in the uncomfortability and to be able to affect change within myself?
I think that's a serious misconception that people see you in a certain place, in a certain level of peace. They think that you are, this elevated person, or that you just, nothing bothers you. And it's like, no, this is something I work at every day still.
Every day, every day. It's just like a muscle. If you don't utilize it, if you don't work it out, then you end up losing the muscle mass. And it's the same thing that happens with our own spiritual conceptions of, awareness, accountability, action, boundaries, belief structures. It's forever unfolding. That's why we're here. We're meant to be here in order to have the multidimensional perspective, to bring it down into the physicality so that we can actually address it in a different dimensional frequency. So how do I actually honor that? And I know that this is a life mastery. This is not a 1 month mastery. This is not a 6 month mastery. This is a life mastery. How do I continue to be accountable for myself and how I show up for everyone around me and show up for humanity? And that's where we come back to. If I'm not in the congruency of my own leadership, then I'm not being truthful or honest about who I am. And that is not in the congruency or in the integrity of me.
Correct. Absolutely. Now, Roxanne, could I please ask you to share with our listeners a brief guided moment, even if it's 90 seconds, of a quick embodiment exercise to provide the audience with a taste of the work that you do?
Absolutely. So it really is always dependent on who is coming to me. If they've done a little bit more of, mental body work or emotional body work or physical work, whatever that might be. So it's always, a divine blueprint and a customized blueprint to each individual person that comes to me. But the most important thing is that a lot of us are only taught how to use our breath in order to survive. But in reality, our breath is actually used to heal. And the more that we can become a little bit more accustomed to our own breath and not just be in a survival state, but to actually, close our eyes and just where the mind is kind of drawing us or where our body is drawing us, to be able to breathe into those spaces and to be able to get to a place where we can breathe within our entire chakra system, our entire centers of intelligence. And that includes our crown, being able to bring the breath, not just internal of the body, but external of the body as well. And that is, the beauty of the power of breath. So being able to learn to master our breath, and however they choose to do that. Sometimes it's, smaller windows of time of just being able to bring our breath into our heart space and then trying to bring our breath down into our solar plexus and then down into our sacral and then down into our root. How are we actually able to just be able to be in that breath without feeling that that there's an expectation or if we're doing things right, but in reality, the breath is ours to be able to master within our own selves in order to heal the body. So the more that we learn how to activate our breath and to be able to breathe into those spaces and to listen to if our body is saying, something's sitting in my heart space or something sitting in my hips or my back, and being able to actually attune ourselves to our body to be able to release and to relinquish whatever the emotional codex, whatever the experience, the belief structure that is there, so that we can actually activate the pineal gland for deeper healing. So the more that we master our breath, the more that we come into our breath, and breath isn't always going to look like breathing in, inhaling for 4 seconds, releasing for 4 seconds. Sometimes it's going to be more exasperated breath where we're actually pushing energy out of our body in order to actually surrender. And then we're bringing ourselves into more of a transient state within ourselves while still being full consciously aware.
Thank you so much. Roxanne, this has been absolutely transformational. Your insights about embodied leadership, unity consciousness, and creating change from that deep place of authenticity. I can feel our entire community just lighting up with recognition and inspiration. For everyone listening, if Roxanne's words resonated with that deep yes in your soul, if you're feeling called to step more fully into your authentic power and be part of the conscious change our world desperately needs, I want you to know that transformation is possible. You don't have to choose between personal sovereignty and collective service. You can have both, and you can thrive in that space. Roxanne, thank you for gracing our sacred space today with your wisdom, your presence, and your commitment to elevating humanity. Your work is clearly needed now more than ever.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It was an honor being here and co-creating with you. I deeply, deeply appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. Beloveds, before you go, if this conversation sparks something in you, let us know in the comments. What was your biggest takeaway? And if you know someone who's ready to step into conscious leadership, or if you're feeling called to do this work yourself, please share this with them. Subscribe to Awaken Your Authentic Self if you haven't already, because we're bringing you more conversations like this with incredible wisdom keepers who are helping us remember who we truly are. I will have all of Roxanne's information and her links in the show's description. Beautiful souls, thank you so very much for being here, for showing up for your own awakening, and for being part of this growing community of authentic beings ready to change the world through embodying our truest selves. Until next time, my loves, keep awakening, keep being authentic, and keep rising into your fullest expression.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Roxanne.